This conference will now be recorded.
And I'm gonna pull up Facebook, it's something that we talked about.
Oh, no, I just watched this documentary. It's 7 years
Oh,
old.
is
It's
it
good.
the,
Terms and additions may apply, and the fact that the extent of which they, like, government can't do it anymore.
Well, let's open the meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, yeah, because I'm around a bunch of kids all the time.
Speaking, I don't see any reason why not.
Taking you guys on.
I look at it too, I can control looking around.
So we're happy to have Dean here tonight, and the topic of his address this evening has to do with the work that's going on with respect to the land use code and various considerations. And I believe previously Dean shared with you what he felt the phases would be that would be necessary to affect any meaningful changes in the land use code over time. And it looks to me like you're well along in terms of your original review process that you shared with us. So with that said, I'm happy to introduce Dean Dietrich
Okay.
for that purpose.
I didn't bring, did you get copies of the request for proposal?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe, because what we have right now is, we have always, first of all, I should take a step back. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you. And I'm here representing a group of extraordinary individuals who've taken a lot of time and done a lot and really accomplished quite a bit. And are willing to do a lot more work. And that'd be Jackie Kelly, Bill Billerman, Dan Keller, Liz Clark. They are the core of the committee. We also have a village board representative, Mr. Devlin. We have a town board representative, Emily Kilburn. Tim Smith has been a phone call away whenever we needed him. And either Darcy LaFave or Mike Orticelli or both of them have attended every meeting. And by that, I mean, we've met every Tuesday since we got the marching orders to go and do this. We said we would, at the very beginning of this, we said we were going to deal with a consultant. And what we have submitted to you is an RFP that we believe is necessary, or is ready to go out and bid for a consultant. And of course, you have to make a decision to go pull the trigger on that. And when you make that decision to pull the trigger, you are making a few commitments. And so you should be aware of the commitments you're going to make before you send out the RFP. I am going to make the same presentation to the town board tomorrow. And at some point in time, since it's a joint venture, at some point in time, some members, I think, Mr. Mayor, some of your board and the town board have got to get together and give our committee the approval to move ahead.
I think that will follow your presentation. That's a discussion that Jay and I will engage in once you have this piece on the table.
And we can go down to at the very beginning there. I think the background information is background information. We put this RFP together. Liz Clark was very important in doing this. She's had a lot of experience here, Dan Keller. And we basically used the model that we used when we put the RFPs together for the Des Moines housing and short-term rentals. So we took a lot of information from that too. But if you look at, one of the things we're going to do is the internal scoping, and the preliminary findings regarding needed changes on page 4 really goes through what we have found. We have fairly specific recommendations for each of these, but our main thing was to coordinate town and village approaches to short-term rental regulations. And like I say, that this is what we're asking the consultant to do. We are looking to promote economic expansion through mixed use. We're looking to promote affordable housing. We're looking to adjust signage regulations. We're looking to enhance environmental standards and streamline the administrative and enforcement efforts. And all of these ideas came from either the public hearings we talked about, or discussions with the building office, discussions with the review board, discussions with the ZBA. That's the internal scoping. What have we been doing so far with the land use code since 2011, excuse me, that we need to work on? This is the list we came up with. And as I said, we have fairly, this list is divided into 3 sections. We have some that they're fairly, I actually brought a few that we could have done right away a couple weeks ago. And we have very specific recommendations about some of these. Some of these we have recommendations which has some suggested language. We'd like to ask a consultant, can you go out and find a community that does it better? Is there a better way to say what we're saying? And for some of these, we actually have a goal, and we'll be asking a consultant, how do we achieve that goal? But we have this list that can further be subdivided into those 3 categories. So we know exactly what we need to communicate with the consultant, I believe. And then, of course, the final thing is just administrative edits. We have some list of definitions. I brought a few of those to you last time. That's the list that completes our internal scoping. If you look at the next one, the scope of services and deliverables, the first, we are making some commitments to try to make this process as effective and as cost efficient as possible. So we are saying that with the exception of 1 meeting, it would be okay for a consultant to come here virtually. And the land use steering committee would be the boots on the ground for any virtual meetings that a consultant wants to have. We think that reduces the price of an RFP, of a bid, because it just reduces travel time, makes things a lot easier. We are committing you, or you would be committing to any time that the very first thing, we do want the consultant to come here once. Got to come here at least once, look you in the eye, look at the land use code steering committee, and drive around the neighborhood, get a feeling of what the place is. If you accepted this RFP, you would be committing to the fact that anytime the one time that the consultant wanted to meet with the village and town board, that you would do so jointly. You know, pick a time, as many members of the village board can get there, as many villages at the town board. Again, we're trying to keep the cost down and the efficiency of the operation. That doesn't mean that if you couldn't make that meeting, you couldn't have some input. There's going to be plenty of back and forth. There's almost a weekly meeting between the land use code steering committee and the consultant. So there's plenty of opportunities for communication. But by doing that, we can keep the cost down.
Are you gonna, I apologize, Dean, are you gonna highlight the sort of the channel of the avenue in order to be able to be involved in the communication in that sort of regard? Because there seems to be a lot of subcommittees kind of in orbit, but we only get the filtered down gist from here and there. If we're not on the committee.
I'm not sure. You do have 2 people that are on the land use code steering committee. Art,
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So he can ask any questions, or I can answer any questions.
Do you generate minutes?
We do have notes. We don't generate minutes per se, but we have notes. Yeah.
Okay.
So all these things, obviously, what you're looking at for that scope is the culmination of all the notes that we took with
Okay.
that.
And a lot of what we've done so far, I brought up, it's been boring. Really 6-7 weeks of doing edits to the land code, which the land code office one, I kind of mentioned we were doing it. I don't think you want minutes from that, trust me.
Well,
But the important things that came down to this public hearing part and this expert, now there'll be something to report. And obviously, if you've got any questions that you want me to ask or bring back or get answers. I can do that.
And the scoping mechanism is a little bit different from any meeting that we are making the consultant as part of the bid responsible for taking minutes of any meeting.
mhm.
And those will be public record. Does
Mhm.
that answer your question? Maybe that's.
Yeah.
That's what I'm sure you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just kind of like to correlate. I know Art is a treasure trove because he's an active participant. But let's say if these edits are being made, but that it's being made on a subcommittee level, but then translated to just what would be.
But they still have to go to a public hearing.
I just having that sort of document, at least circulated within the municipal level of here's what it is and here are the edits or proposed edits, much like the short-term rental where they had like the edits on the sides. That would be a way to kind of stay more in the loop without having to kind of
So
question you.
I think to answer your question, if you scroll down to page 5, 1A deliverables. So these are deliverables for section 1A. Land use code steering committee meeting notes. So they're going to supply meeting notes from every time they're talking to land use code steering committee. If they interview people on the street, they have to provide interview notes. The most important thing are the memorandums. what you will probably be the most interested in is, once we do the external scoping, they're gonna write a memorandum that says, this is what we want to add to the internal scoping. And so that memorandum will certainly be out here. And that will be open for public review and comment. But we are, I guess, I didn't really understand your question, but I get it now. There will be written landmarks, I guess is a better way to say, of each thing that's happening. Those will be available. And at certain points in time will be summarized, where we'll come to you and say, are we on the right track?
Yeah, okay.
And here's what we're doing. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, because although many people don't see the hard work behind the scenes, they just see what would be a completed product with little input. And I just wanted to, if we're going to revise it, which is going to be, I wouldn't say controversial, but we're going to have to take very distinct.
But some of it will be
Perspectives on it?
controversial. And
Oh, I
some
understand.
of it won't be. Really, what we've been doing is taking the, I hate to use the word boring, but the mundane tasks and getting them out of the way, but then also setting up what's going to happen in the future. Now it's going to be starting to be something you'll want to pay attention to.
Sure, and that's like, but, so it's like the circles, it's like you're in there, and then we kind of are, like a Venn diagram, are kind of in your, but then the Joe Schmo who is not, that's going to be the, what seems to be a challenge that we've run into on the board is we're making great progress on very significant issues. But then after the fact, they may not be as well received as we anticipated them to be, because we maybe didn't reach out as early.
Well, the scoping process develops is two phases to it. So there's 1A, I just talked about 1A, and talk to everybody here. And then there's 1B. And 1B starts to expand, is the external scoping, where you start to expand to the community.
Sure.
And we are requiring at least 3 meetings, or probably 4. One would be a general meeting. This is what we're doing. And then we're asking them to kind of specialize what information, this is everything we're doing in the general meeting. What is really affecting the shore owners? And we're suggesting, we are requiring them to have 3 community meetings on top of the general information meeting.
Okay.
One would be with people who live in the shoreline overlay. I mean, if you don't live there, you can still show up to the meeting. But it would basically hit the items that deal with the shoreline overlay. One would be a meeting that deals with people that are in predominantly the residential districts. So here's how what we anticipate the changes of the short-term rentals would impact the different residential districts. And we would also have a third meeting, which would be designed for the people who live in or businesses in the more commercial districts, the village center and the highway corridor and the military corridor. So we're asking for we're asking the consultant in his bid to build into the plan, the outreach plan, a general meeting, everybody can come and here's all the things we're going to do, and then 3 breakout groups. And of course, anybody who can't make one breakout group can come to another one, and then there'll be other methods of communication open. So those meetings with the public do 2 things. This is what we've discussed we're going to be doing. What do you think we missed? And so it's an informational meeting, and it's a 2-way informational meeting. And then we take all those and then move that forward. And this is the final thing, is where they come up with the scope of services. We've talked to all the people, the major players, a few other people who are involved in the land use code all the time. We've talked to the community. Here's what we think you need to do. And yes.
Part of the consultant's fee or job responsibility, the actual outreach to the community?
Yes.
Okay, and how are they going to get because one of the problems we have is everyone says we could put it in the newspaper, we could put it on the radio, we could put it on Bruce's website, we could put it wherever, and they say, well, we didn't know about it. So we didn't come.
They have to come up with a public involvement plan.
Okay.
And so how they want to do it is somewhat up to them and to their own bids. What we envision is all of the above, the press release, the interactive project page on the website, and also virtual meetings. You know, we are talking about maybe the convention center, so you come in person and be spread out, but you could still attend virtually. You know, the consultant would be there virtually, and the people that are handing out the materials would be the steering committee. That's kind of a vision. It's going to be up to the consultants. Different consultants have different ways they want to do that.
Well, and I think it kind of goes back to what Jason was saying. Some of the pushback that the board has gotten is because all the ideas are encompassed within these subcommittees or these groups. And then when we go to present it, they say, well, why weren't we involved? Which it seems like they are going to be involved in this case scenario. It's just, we've always had an issue of getting it out to the public to say, hey, you can come in here and give your opinion or talk to us about what you want to talk to us about. That's always seemed to be, and I've had this conversation with Kate Tyson before, how do we get it to the public?
And I think, in all honesty, I think at some point in time, to get this started, we just had discussions amongst ourselves, how we're going to do that. And we didn't open those were discussions among ourselves, how we're going to accomplish that goal.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of people coming in to tell us about that. But what we've come up with is this. So there is always a dark point. You want to be as light as you can, but there is a point where you gotta make a decision, you gotta talk to each other, figure out what's going on. And I think what we're trying to do here is develop a process that is very open and does include people. We did get some criticism that the group that moved forward are not stakeholders. This is where we move out the stakeholders. The group that I mentioned at the very beginning were not designed to be stakeholders. They were designed to be, they were people who had experience with the land use code that could say, here's the experiences I've had with the land use code since 2011, and here's where I found there have been some problems. And those were the people that were talking first. Now we're reaching out to the stakeholders. And I know we got some criticism because we didn't do the stakeholders first, but we had a plan. This is plan A, part B.
Well, and I don't think that's a bad idea. I think it's always best to look at something from an outside view, because sometimes the people internally may have jaded opinions or personal opinions that affect their judgment. My main purpose was just because I'd like to know how to get it out to everybody at this point in time.
Well, we're getting into the communication subcommittee, and we're looking at project pages, we're looking at public forums, looking at press releases. There's been a lot of work done in the last 2 months, as you know, about those things.
And it's a almost day-to-day conversation.
Oh, yeah.
How hard or expensive or both is it to put it out, say, when the water bill goes out?
Not hard at all.
I don't mean to, we talked before, at least talked to someone about putting a line was written on the top, but to actually put a piece of paper in.
All it is, we have the secondary tray that
Okay.
paper goes in, and it
But
folds it right in with it.
Because that was.
That's easy enough to do.
A lot of these people.
Artie, maybe this question for you. I understood this part of the scope was going to be to actually look at the neighborhoods and to see if we should be more restrictive with vacation rentals or less
That's what we're waiting
restrictive.
for the expert for.
Well, we are doing that. We've made some decisions. Yes, we'll have a
As part of the
discussion.
scope,
Yes,
to go neighborhood by neighborhood.
absolutely.
I
Yes.
mean, no major decisions have been made. It's really at this point, taking everything that was there, funneling it into where is it going to go? Because like I said, for the first 2 months, it was
How do you,
change a paragraph here. It was just problems that the code enforcement office was running up against that were just improperly worded. And you had Bill Millerman, you had Dean, the architects of this there. And they said, yeah, these are pretty just simple changes. Like we used to, everyone would come to the board every year and would be, we need this change, and this change.
Yeah.
And we tried to get those done first because they've got to deal with them day in and day out. But then I think the problem there was the minute you do those, you've got to redo all those thick books. Why not wait for everything? Am I right on that?
but to answer your question up here, the answer to that is yes. We will have, at least it's a discussion point. It says these are neighborhoods where we think you can have hosted. These are neighborhoods where you shouldn't have any hosted. These are neighborhoods where you shouldn't have any. And it's going to be based on the decisions that came out of the town and village boards in the public hearing. One thing
And
is
the
certainly.
information we have now from the vacation rental
Yeah.
registration program.
Yes. And we have one of the things we did is, I said we did, but Patrick Wells, your guy really did it, is create a GIS map. And now we can say, okay, if we take this neighborhood and we say, oh, no vacation rentals in that neighborhood, we know exactly that will be affecting 2 people. One of them is a hosted and 2 are not hosted. We know that now. And so that's exactly how we're moving forward. And we want to talk to the consultant before we roll that out, but yes, there will be, when we talk, I think we'd be doing the consultant a disfavor if we didn't say, yeah, here's where the discussion seems to be leading in terms of being more restrictive.
The other point that we should need to be mindful of here is that these modifications of the code does require public hearings and getting the community informed and out there. So I think taking a considered approach such as this is outlining is desirable to having people see a public hearing notice and finding out that it's for the preliminary work that the steering committee has worked on before it's been matriculated through the consultant.
That's the end of the process, the public hearing.
Well, we have built-in informational hearings. The end of the process is the public hearing. Hopefully, by the time you get to the public hearing, there's been enough informational hearings and everything's squared away. So we have 3 informational hearings there. We got 2 more when we get to the next phase where people can say, oh, you missed this, you missed that. And hopefully when you get to the public hearing, everything's done.
Am I right or
That would
wrong?
be our goal. That doesn't mean that people aren't going to stand up at the public hearing and complain. It just means that they've complained 4 times before and we've tried to take into account their concerns.
Am I right or wrong in looking at your schedule of events that probably won't be until the beginning of January before we can start having someone on board, having informational hearings?
It depends on how fast we move. We would like to get this, if we get this out by middle of October, we figure we can hire somebody for Christmas. You know, and that's what I said. I don't know if it takes another week for the town and village board to get together, then it's the middle of January.
Yeah.
But the first part of that is talking to the community and figure out what are we exactly going to do. And the second part then is actually, if you look at it, is actually drafting the code. And then after you draft the code, then you take it up. Here are the changes. What do you think about the changes? We go through the process again and tweak it next time. And then finally, the final deliverable is, you know, here it is. This is the draft where the village boards can have a public hearing on this draft and move forward on it.
Okay. So the last, not to hold you up, there's a political component that comes in with sort of a study like this. My understanding is that they're going to collect data and make potential recommendations, thus leaving it more of an objective sort of a quote unquote study, so to speak. Is that what or is there going to be more of a, they're going to incorporate the concerns of the public and make recommendations on changes in the code as part of the overall report?
I think it's a combination of the two. It's not either or, I think it's a combination of two. Based on what you were saying, this is the direction we want to go. So to get away from short-term rentals, one of the things you want to do is do mixed uses on the corridors. All right, now your setback is 35 feet. We look at everything there, and you know, if you look at all that information, we don't think you still need a 20-foot setback, even if you're going to have a store in front. So you kind of take what you were talking about, what the public wants to do, and then look at the facts of the ground and come up with a number and a metric that kind of deals with it. It's a fuzzy process in some degrees because you are trying to create an evaluative system. You're trying to create a metric. And whenever you create a metric, there's going to be some question about how you came up with that measurement system, and that's what you got to try to do.
Okay.
And another thing that really worked out well in our favor is the fact that when we started our first meetings, we didn't have very much data on what with vacation rental permits because they were just starting to come in. And we're just getting to the point now where they're almost all in and we can start pulling out information from them. And by the time our consultant comes and we have a lot of that raw data for them, it's all working very, putting together.
But to be clear, we're not doing this solely for sort of a vacation rental sort of a solution to this is more, that's a part of a more comprehensive approach to the land use code.
Well, if you
To move forward, correct.
Yeah, and so, yes, I'll leave it at that.
Well, and when we put the vacation rental permit process in place, and it took us how many years? It was years. And we finally had to make a lot of compromises and just say, let's get something in place or we're going to be another year without this. And we put it in place, but then that was when the mayor said, let's also throw this to the land code to review it all. So we are reviewing it all, and part of it will be this vacation rental.
Oh, yeah.
But it's also that other part I talked about with all the edits and whatever that the office wanted.
And it is a lot, you look at that list of scoping, there's a lot there, but vacation rentals is part of it. And part of the problem was that the land use code didn't fit into the 2 different philosophies of the board. The poster child ran Johnson Avenue. So the village town line goes right through Johnson Avenue. On one side of Johnson Avenue, you can rent for 90 days. On the other side of the line, you can rent for 120 days. It doesn't make, it's the same neighborhood. So you got to figure out how to holistically deal with that. And in order to do that, you can't use the village boundary line. You have to use you have to do some kind of districting with the land use code.
Okay.
So that's what's driving that.
Okay.
The process may become a little more clear if you go to page 9, because this is, you know, we're hoping to release the RFP by October 15. We are trying to maintain the protocols, the proper protocols for bidding. So the protocol is, if you tell one person anything, you got to tell anybody that's a part of the bid, everything. So what we've established is, you know, we put the bids out, we'll publish them through the APA, American Planning Association. We'll send them to our usual suspects. We'll send them to the colleges we work with. We'll disseminate them as much as we possibly can.
Mhm.
We want to have a virtual meeting. Anybody who's interested in a bid, pretty much like your bid conference, I think you had with your contractors, can call in and be part of this virtual meeting. After that, if you have a question, the question has to come in writing. The question's in writing and responses in writing for all bids, all contractors to be able to see. So that follows the procurement policy. Everybody's treated equally. We talk about, it's not ex parte communication, but you don't talk to one person without talking to everybody. And so we set up the bid process to do that. You look at it, we are selecting our consultant on December 24th. That's our Christmas gift to ourselves. And then all the contracts and everything are set by January 15th. They do their scoping in 4 months, and then they have 8 months to do the phase 2, where they actually write it, put it out for professional meetings, revise it, rewrite it, put it out again, and work their way through it. So our target completion date is the middle of January 2022. And we think gives a consultant enough time. For this, we're asking the village and boards to commit to one of the things we're saying here is that right at this particular point in time, we have $50,000 budgeted for the process. And we've talked about that before. That's been the ballpark figure. We don't know what's going to happen. It could be the bids come out and say we can't do it for $50,000. It's going to be 60, 70. Then we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But unless we have a number out there, you compare apples to oranges. You know, because somebody will come up with a thing that's $200,000 and another guy will come up with something that's $20,000. Do the best you can for 50. What can you do for around 50 grand? And some of them might come in at 55, 56, some might come in at 45, you don't know. But at least we have everybody in the same frame.
Mhm.
So by accepting this RFP, you're not saying we will spend $50,000, but the other hand is it should be a correct statement that between the town and village, you're thinking in the ballpark of $50,000. And if you're not doing that, then you shouldn't approve this RFP, because we'll be leading people astray at that point in time.
I think what's going to happen here is that you're meeting with the town board tomorrow evening. We will try to arrange for some appropriate conversation between the two bodies and try to respond reasonably. At this point, putting the RFPs out doesn't expose, and as we said, if we get RFPs responses that are $200,000, then maybe we're not acting on it. Maybe we have to do something different. But the reality is the first step in moving this project forward is to get the proposals from the professionals that are needed to do this job. And I think it's fair to say this is a big undertaking for the community. But it does have substantial motivations. And while short-term rentals have been an obvious motivation to try to reach out and do more with the code, that there are other elements of the community. I'm well aware of that the good people that populate the waterfront on the lake have approached Jay and I and asked us if we wanted to be sure that they had some voice someplace in the process. I think you've answered that. And I think that's good, but I think it's also important for our neighborhoods to have an opportunity to be part of that conversation that's built in here. I think this plan is, as a proposal, is well designed. I hope we can stay close to the calendar.
Me too. Me too.
Wasn't that what we're hoping the professional will do for us?
Yes, big speed up. One of the things there's no two ways about it. I mean, right now we've been working with volunteers. And we can do it early in the morning, you got to quickly after an hour because everybody's got to get to work. You can't have people that go more than once a week. And so that slows down the process considerably. It's so much information if you want to do the full. And this will push things along. Hopefully by January of 2022, we'll be done.
No, I just,
That would be
the
tremendous.
total cost is 50, meaning 25 and 25, or is it 50?
That's the way.
That's the discussion that needs to take place between the town and village boards. And,
But I think
that's beyond Dean's reach.
your question was, is it 50 and 50 or is it 25?
Yeah,
25? It's
right.
25.
Because the way it's run, the village and town have budgeted approximately 50,000. I would take that as individually, we both budgeted $50,000.
Mr. Mayor said that's not my concern. I have no jurisdiction. I think you guys will.
I do think there'll have to be a follow-up joint meeting because we have to come to an agreement between the two boards now as to how this goes forward. But with tomorrow evening accomplished, I would think we could put that in place fairly quickly.
Do you think you need a joint meeting before you send the RFP out? Because there's still no
It
commitment.
that depends on the outcome of this board and the outcome of the town board. If each board is comfortable with putting the RFP out as it's described, then perhaps we can get that part of it out there. That's the paper chase.
Well, at the very minimum, I think to add on to that, there needs to be a commitment from the board to be able to spend the minimum of $25,000. That's what I'm understanding. If we put an RFP out and we're not committing to spending even that minimum, then we're wasting everyone's time.
We think that that's a good target to set out there. It's a good target to set out there to get decent bids and spin realistic bids and to determine if people are interested in it. So that's what the $50,000 figure is.
I suspect that's based on some prior experience of years ago.
Like last land use code was 2011 was $33,000. And if you look at this, is 50,000 is the average cost for land use code revision in the state. So
Keep in mind, we're not building a whole new land use code. This is amending and revising.
anything else I can do for you, gentlemen?
Any other questions for Dean? Janet, do you have any comments that you wish to make? Or do we have her muted?
No, I do not. In fact, I didn't get the RFP till very late this afternoon, so I'm a little bit behind in reviewing it. But I think once the town board meets and if everybody's looking forward to something, then Ron and I'll review it and allow the boards, if that's their wish, to go forward.
It might very well be that process with a review by council, and then maybe we just schedule a special joint meeting of the two boards and get it done.
Do we have to have two boards get together though? I mean, if you and.
Well, I don't want to commit the town board, who hasn't met yet, to, but there's a number of different ways we could go here.
I guess I
think
think
we
there's
need
a possibility our board could commit and give you the authority and the town could do it, and then that would put off having to have a joint meeting and in the newspaper and the time.
Yes, you're not committing to the $50,000, you're committing to the bid out,
Guys, for bids.
which is slightly different.
Janet, any concerns with that type of approach?
No, I don't think so. That it's got the imprimatur of both boards. I just question throwing any number out there because of course, as soon as somebody sees a number, they're going to be expecting something like that. Nope.
If that's the board's pleasure and you wish to do that, certainly as you obviously are aware, I'm working pretty closely with Dean and Art's our point person on the steering committee. So the likelihood is that whatever the outcome is tomorrow evening, we will all be in close communication. So
The RFP will reserve the right to reject any and all bids.
Correct. Yes.
I think that's probably a good safety valve for the board at this point.
It'll just speed the process up by about 3 weeks.
Well, and again, you heard me say, it's certainly desirable to stay on track with the calendar we've got. I mean, we're looking at a year and a half from start to finish, and that's assuming we get started efficiently.
Okay. Thank you very much.
If you wish to extend a motion, I understand what we're trying to get done here, and I'm willing to go forward. Obviously, any movement that comes will come as a result of council's review and advice, and the outcome of the town board tomorrow evening, of course.
So what you're saying is make a motion that, given the outcome, if both boards are positive, give the authority to you to put this RFP out. Is that what you're asking for a motion?
I think that if we're anxious to keep this on track, October 15th is only a few days away.
Should probably come from someone besides me on the committee.
So moved. Second.
Scott, and-
That's what Art said.
Verbatim.
So just to be clear, that motion was to authorize the mayor to work with the supervisor with the goal of releasing or seeking bids through an RFP.
After consulting with council.
Thank you.
That's understood. Is that amendment satisfactory?
Yes.
Any further discussion required, or shall we call a motion? In that case, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Dean.
Thank you very much. It's a milestone. Thank you.
Thanks for all your work.
It's an important, it is an important project.
Thanks.
A wonderful evening.
I intend to. I would love to stay for the rest of your agenda.
Give time just permit.
We know.
That's a little white line.
Wasn't even a little one. Thanks again, gentlemen. That's very nice to have in hand.
Okay, moving on to the items in section 2 of tonight's agenda, we have the minutes of the village board meeting of September 8th, which were tabled from the last meeting, given the fact that we didn't have sufficient attendance to approve them of people who could. So I'd ask for a motion approving the minutes of Tuesday, September 8th, as they're presented. I didn't see any changes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain. Scott abstains. So Jason, you voting?
I was here for the 8th.
I was here for the,
In that case, then,
21st.
any opposition? Any abstentions? If not, the motion passes and those minutes are accepted. Thank you for that, Anita. And the next item we have is the minutes of the last village board meeting, which was Monday, September 21st. It's rather lean attendance at that meeting, as it turned out. But so I would ask for a motion to accept those minutes as presented, recognizing that Peter and Jason were absent.
Second.
Scott, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. That's Cindy.
Just for the record, of my short meeting without you two there.
Are you trying to say that?
Yeah.
He talks all the time. He never stops. I'm like, just let it go. Let's get out of here.
Okay, moving on to item C on the agenda. It's necessary for us to renew and this will be the 6th renewal to the incremental power supply agreement that exists between the New York Power Authority and the Village of Lake Placid's electric department. This particular agreement It's been renewed previously a number of times. We'll extend it for 3 years, commencing January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023. I think absent than that, most of the document that they're asking the village to endorse is the history of the event. The important items are that parties here to hereby agree as follows. 1, to renew the incremental agreement for a 3-year term effective midnight, January 1, 2021, expiring at 11:59 p.m. on December 31st, 2023. Except as provided in that section 1 of the renewal, all other terms and conditions of the incremental agreement remain in full force and effect. I think those are the pertinent.
Wait, where is this agreement? I've never seen it.
It's in the electric department, and it was entered into, the village entered into this on, actually, it was in 1986 agreement between the village and NIPA to provide electricity to the village. We're the customer. That was apparently supplemented in April 19, 2007. And created this incremental 3-year incremental agreement, which we have been doing consistently since that time.
But how do they come up with the math? Like, when there's a greater load on the grid, the rate goes up and.
I can't answer that question. That is a mystery, but remember, I don't know, so Art and I maybe you, Peter, we sat through a NISO, oh, I love these acronyms, a NISO presentation where they actually measure the demand and they make purchases in 15-minute intervals. At least they did at the time that presentation was probably 3 or 4 years ago, Art. I just remember they were announcing the opening of a new service center outside of, I think, Troy, down in that territory. But that's my understanding. There is an agreement that or supports this entire arrangement. This is a supplemental piece.
You understand?
I know the math behind it. I sat through
Oh, yeah?
Kimball and I both did, because I asked the question where the number came from. And 2 gentlemen from NIPA had to go to NISO and ask NISO how to do the calculation and then try to explain it to us. And it's a year ago's bill with a current bill, and you subtract the 2 bills to get the overall rate, and then you go out to bid for the power. It's a conundrum. It's possible. Yeah, pretty much. I have the calculations so that I can spot check it, but it's all set up on a spreadsheet, and all I do is plug in the numbers, because whoever designed it, I get the concept behind it, but it's not easy. And the people at NISO must make a lot of money because it's very complicated.
Well,
But as far as our increment goes, I mean, it goes into this, so we have our set allotment, and then.
on the other hand, I think the important thing for the community to know at large is that this is how this is the relationship that we have in the full service partnership that we have with the New York Power Authority, that we all rely on in those 4 coldest months of the winter, when we're using more power than what our hydro allocation provides to us. And it is done through the NISO organization, and done very efficiently. And I just remember being impressed with the fact that they could go out and bid in 15-minute intervals if they had to. So there must be places that have demands that spike much more than ours.
Well, even ours, I think, depending on the draw and who in particular is drawing, we see our incremental bounce, and you can watch it. And when NIPA's new website goes live, which we should have access to the first part of November, you can actually watch it on their website. It's pretty
Well, that's
cool.
going to be neat.
I'm the test dummy. No pun intended.
Anyway, this is one of those incredibly valuable resources that keeps our community lit, with nobody having to, locally at least, having to sit down and try to figure out how much power we're going to need tomorrow night, or.
Mhm.
So I guess what we need here is a motion. authorizing the mayor to sign this agreement with the New York Power Authority, which will accomplish that incremental increase.
So
Jason
Second.
and Meredith. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Guess everybody wants electricity. Okay, the next item we have is a memorandum of understanding or agreement between the village and the IBEW local union that represents our Lake Placid Electric Department members. I think all of it is pretty straightforward in these pages. These are the items that will amend the contract, that collective bargaining agreement rather, that expired July 31st. There's not a lot in here that's, well, let's face it, everything in here costs us money, but nevertheless, it keeps the lights on. I think some of the important things in here are that we were able to get modification of the documents so that the health insurance plan that the village offers can be substituted as necessary, providing it provides substantially similar benefits to something that may not be available. And we're going to be talking about health insurance a little bit later. So I can tell you that that's a very helpful piece to have in there. The big item, of course, as always, is wage. And in this particular case, if you look at item 7 for Article 33, which is where that's covered, the general membership of the department, with the exception of the 2 ladies that work here in the building in the accounting department, carry titles of tax collector and typist, will receive a 2% increase in their hourly rate, effective on and retroactive to August 1st of this past summer, 2% in 21 and 2% in 22. I said there's an exception in here, and the 2 persons just referenced will actually receive an increase of 75%, I'm sorry, 75 cents an hour, effective on August 1st retroactively, and additionally on August 1st next year, and then it goes back to 2% as of August 1, 2022. In that particular case, their compensation is all governed by the agreement. The 2%, I'm sorry, the 75% for those 2 office positions will bring them, and these are both long-term employees, it'll be $45,000 a year. I think those are the high points of the discussion back and forth, and I am satisfied that we've got a good agreement here that we can live with. So with that said, I would ask for a motion again authorizing the mayor, accepting the memorandum of agreement and authorizing the mayor to execute a contract when it's delivered.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you for that. The next item we have is a request from Kimball Davey, superintendent of our electric department, seeking a advance for one of his members, Troy Jakes, who as of October 5th has attended all of the schools necessary over the last few years and meets the standards to become a first-class lineman, or what's referred to as a journeyman, I'm told, which is step 6 in our labor agreement. Successfully graduated from lineman school, which took place over the last 54 months, I believe. Does have a Class A CDL license, which is a requirement. Meets the employment period of 54 months from his date of hire as a 3rd class lineman. Obviously has the approval of his superintendent. And we do have an opening right now for a first-class lineman vacancy. Lineman will not having resigned and moved on. So effective October 5th, the recommendation is to promote Troy Jakes to first-class lineman step 6 at a pay rate of $38.82 per hour. And he is fully qualified now to go up on top of the pole and handle the primary.
So move. Second.
Any further questions or discussion on that recommendation? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you for that. And we congratulate Mr. Jakes. He has done an amazing job of moving up the ranks progressively without any issues.
I would just note for the record that 3882 is the current union rate. So we've just approved the new union rates, so that will increase by 2%.
So noted.
So noted. Thank you. You're right. We don't have the contract yet. Next item we have, I brought it up for conversation at the last board meeting. And that was the possibility of the village police department investing $9,700 under state contract to acquire what's referred to as a Stalker SAM. It's a speed awareness monitor that's portable, that can be moved around the neighborhoods as needed, and would be a tremendous supplement to our police officers that are out trying to catch speeding traffic. There are occasional neighborhoods, and it's routine. We get these calls fairly often. We try to do it with manpower, but we're not always there at the right times to catch. This particular unit has the added feature of not only flashing your speed in front of you so you know that you're above the speed limit, but also has the ability digitally to gather and collect the information on the number of vehicles, the speed they're traveling at, and the time of day, which may very well help us to use our manpower a little more efficiently in terms of where they need to be, maybe to slow people down. Many people may think the objective is to issue tickets, but the real objective is in our neighborhoods to slow traffic and keep it at a reasonable speed so that residents are not complaining all the time or at risk.
So just for my own benefit, the email that was going around, the location was predominantly Mill Pond Drive, and I've asked several people live there, and they feel they've corroborated the sort of the driving that goes by, and it's relatively quick. Do we have other, is it predominant, are we going to do it or house this there predominantly, or are we just going to move it from place to place?
It can be moved from time to time wherever it's needed. It's portable. The other neighborhoods that I have notes on with similar complaints are Blueberry Hill, which sometimes some people cut through. Signal Hill is a particularly bad situation. It's a narrow neighborhood street, and it is a major bypass for people coming in from the Wilmington side of the community and trying to get onto Saranac Lake. And I think most of us realize that that's a hillcrest occasionally. And I think with the work we've got coming up this coming year, we're going to have other needs for this type of equipment. Having one would be helpful. Having more than one would be even more helpful, but I think we have to start.
Plus another advantage might be like at the school zones where the school lights go out or something happens to it, you can stick it down there temporarily until you can get it fixed. And you have the ideas to move it around.
The other nice thing is that the signage at the bottom can be changed so that it reflects, because we have neighborhoods that are 30 miles an hour, which is the village-wide speed limit, and then we have posted areas which are 25. They're sections of neighborhoods. And then we also have school districts, which are actually either 20 or 25, depending. I think they call Military Road is 25, and the other two are 20. But that's, that's a project I'm going to comment on under old business a little bit. But I frankly, I can't think of any other way. I mean, we can put more police officers out, which means hiring more people, or we can acquire a piece of equipment and gather the data so we can use our existing force more effectively. And I do strongly endorse it. I think it's a good,
So moved.
Second.
further
Aye.
discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Art, will you let Bill know that you're proceed with that if they're. Scott? Next item we have is a request from the police department for Chuck Dobson, who's the deputy chief, or assistant chief, to attend a leadership summit October 28th and 29th in Lake George. It's a relatively modest cost. Program's $160, and you'll have one night at hotel lodge. It appears to be the extent of cost. The topics are attached in your agenda, but they deal largely with stuff that's going on in law enforcement that we're all reading about: bail reform, global pandemic, anti-police sentiments, and how to address community concerns, demands for reform. So I think it's a good leadership program for Chuck.
So moved.
Second.
Peter, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Only question on that is, I assume that they're allowed to gather. I didn't ask that question. They talked to Bill.
You know, looking at the directions, it appears that they're limiting the number of attendees to the first 50. The first 50 registrants from each association will be accepted. We'll then maintain a wait list.
Good.
So it appears that they've have a plan to deal with gatherings. The next item we have is on the agenda later today. The police department's been interviewing for some time, or I should say, looking for a replacement traffic control officer. That's one that has not been here all year. And we have a part-time candidate. You believe you all have a copy of this. It's Brian Bola. He's a J New York resident. He's retired, I believe. That's correct. And has met all of the requirements of the department to the point where the chief provided us with a memorandum recommending his hire as a part-time Main Street patrol officer, and feels that he's well qualified for the position.
Have you talked to Bill about him? Art?
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't talk to me about it. I'm just looking at the application. It's a little vague in his work history. I didn't want to get.
He's a retired federal corrections
That's
officer.
what I kind of was told. But we got the minimum in here.
That's my fault. I helped him fill it out.
Oh. Okay.
Well,
It's my dad.
Oh.
it appears each time he's moved for other employment, so.
Yeah, no, I just said, just a little blank.
I think what I'm hoping we have developing here, we've talked about this position. It's important to us in terms of maintaining any kind of enforcement of our pay stations parking, but also I'm looking forward to something that I remember from years past when this position becomes somewhat of a Main Street ambassador in terms of what we can do to help people on the street that need help, either figuring out how to use the pay station or maybe they need some local direction. I'm reminded of the years that Millie Kelly or Bill McKinney served in those positions. And there have been others who have just helped to make our Main Street a little bit friendlier where we can. And certainly this summer we got through with one traffic control officer, but it's difficult, I think, to be in more than one place at a time. So with the traffic congestion that we have and the primary role of them, to have someone on the street, particularly that can walk a little bit, it's a big help. And it also would be helpful in terms of handing out the little face mask cards that we supplied to our police officers this year. That was effective. And we, sadly enough, it looks like we're going to be continuing the requirement for face masks for a while to come. So any questions, comments? The starting rate for this position with the new contract in place would be $16.51 per hour. And again, keep in mind, this is part-time. It does not carry a benefit load with it.
Is there any intentions of going full-time, or are we just gonna stay part-time?
I can't answer that question.
I think Billy's hope was to get a few part-time people. That way they could do different shifts.
We did just, after like almost a year, finally get another application, so potentially we would have another part or full-time person.
But part-time is always appealing because we get caught, we get caught when and these people just aren't always waiting in line. We don't have a waiting list of people, but you know, I look at this, I look at the guy that we support through Roost that goes around every day and sweeps up the cigarette butts and debris that,
Yeah, and he's out the rest of the year, isn't he?
again,
Yeah, he has to have another surgery.
Yeah.
he's done an outstanding job of keeping us picked up and tidy.
Pick the right time for surgery.
Yeah.
Bruce Curran,
Yeah.
he's a good guy.
So with that said, we have this
So moved.
request.
Second?
All right, Peter, any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you for that. And anything else, Anita, from your area?
No, that's all.
That's okay. In that case, then, Mindy, we'll come to you.
Mindy, I had one question on the warrant. There's a check issue that I've never seen before to the New York State DEC for $8,000. What the heck
It's-
is that for?
I believe it's for, I'd have to double check. The DEC had to pick up a spill. We had another one of those spill responses from,
But what's it for?
Yes. that's my understanding.
I know we had one up on
It was recent.
I think it was the transformers, where there's several transformers that were inspected.
They'll bill for it.
Yeah.
But
There were
every
several.
spill response, we get charged, and they finally just billed us for it.
Okay, I think it was for the general fund came out, would that be right?
No,
Hey,
it may have something to do with Brad's department for highway. I'll find out, let you know.
and it should be electric. Probably.
That didn't come across my desk, so it would have had to have been Brad.
Okay,
Is he close to
so
the-
that's sort of the foilers. This bill was the one at Stewart's and.
You want it St. Agnes?
Yep, St. Agnes Stewart's, which is one of the reasons why we're checking all of our transformers. Although most of the modern ones have,
So that can be expensive in a hurry.
can be. Well, again, I know Kimball told me that they were investigating a number of transformers, so we may hear more discussion on it.
Well, as they're doing the inventory project.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So with that said, the total bills represented by this file is $884,841.77. The biggest items were mostly bond payments totaling $514,000. Had a grid payment of $97,000 from National Grid, and we purchased additional electric meters, I think $52,000 worth. I think that's what I remember. And then there was a general disbursement of 13,000. I missed the 8,000, Peter. I'm feeling ashamed. Good eye.
So you get all the other big amounts that are in there and kind of glaze over.
Yeah. With that said, we have a motion to approve the payment of the bills as presented.
First and second, Scott.
We did.
We did.
Oh, you did? In that case, I'll call the motion. You got that, Anita? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we can pay the bills. The next item I would like Mindy to speak to is we did meet last week with Mark Crawford from Burnham Associates to review the 2021 health insurance renewal. And I'll let Mindy describe that. It's mostly good news.
Yeah, so Excelis decided to not raise rates this year. Everything was flat. Ours actually decreased by 0.3%, which is the first. It doesn't generally happen that way. At least normally we have some sort of an increase. The plan did change slightly. So the out-of-pocket max has increased. None of these increases are substantial. They're still covered by our HSA contribution. So as far as the deductible is concerned, the employee is still covered. The max out-of-pocket did increase, as did the co-insurance amount. Co-insurance used to be 15%, now it's 20%, which is standard for most plans. The Medicare transition plan went down 2.4%. We only have one person on it currently, but I believe we're gonna have
Two will
two.
be on next.
Yeah. The only major difference with that was the in and outpatient charges went up $20 a piece. So if they get put into the hospital, they have to pay an extra $20, and if they have an outpatient surgery, it's an extra $20. We don't have many claims when it comes to that, so we don't really have to worry about it. And we added an option for elective vision insurance, which we have not had in the past. It is not something that's going on the union contracts. It is something like Aflac, where if they want to join in, the vision insurance is so cheap that for a single person, it's $10 a month. So if they decide that it's something that they want to do, we'll add a deduction code for it. And as long as we have 25% enrollment, they can join the plan. And it's through Guardian, which is where our dental is through anyways. So it's all encompassed into one. But one of our employees actually had called Burnham to see if it was possible to get vision insurance.
25% of the total?
25% of the total employees. So we need 16 and a quarter people to sign up.
Now, is $10 just a single, or is that cover?
10 is a single. A full family is 27, 26. And an employee with child or an employee and spouse ranges between 16 and 17 bucks. Closer to 17 for the two people.
Depending on what it covers.
Yeah. But it's Davis Insurance for vision. I've had it before. It's really good insurance coverage. Covers your annual exam, lenses, contact lenses, frames once every calendar year. So it's a nice added benefit.
So the increase, you're saying the increase in costs, even though the plan is less expensive, that there are certain costs that when the village contributes, we contribute 20% of the
Depends on
HSA?
the union contract. So the HSA is a flat dollar amount that we put in every year.
Okay.
It's different for single than it is for a two-person or a family.
Sure.
The changes to the insurance plan this year were mostly the co-insurance and the deductible. So last year's deductible for a single was $1,400. This year's is $1,600. We give them $2,100.
Okay.
We're still ahead of the game.
Yeah, so they still have excess money, which goes towards their out-of-pocket max. We don't cover the full out-of-pocket max. We've not ever covered the full out-of-pocket max.
Mhm.
So it's no different. It's just the amount of co-insurance that you're paying. You pay that 20% co-insurance until you hit your out-of-pocket max. And at that point, you're fully covered. So those are the main differences in the insurance plan. Although I will say, our claims for insurance are minimal.
You know, there is something that this year they provided that they haven't done in the past, and that is a little bit of a history, historical use of our plans. And I think at our work session, I'll try to produce some copies so you can all see what our particular plan looks like.
What about Medicare retirees?
That plan changed minimally. It actually went down in cost, 2.4%. Yes, everything is staying flat because of COVID. For the
By
most part.
government mandate or because they didn't?
No.
The insurance company as much?
Yeah, they have less.
They paid out
Expenses going on
substantially
right now.
less money.
Because, yes, there's a lot of people that have gone to the hospital for COVID, but most of them are inpatient, so the insurance company is covering it. But because so many people are sanitizing and trying to stay healthy, there's less frequent visits to the doctor's office. Plus, for our insurance plan, which I found out, all telemedicine calls, so if you don't go into the doctor's office, but you use telemedicine instead, it's covered in full, so you don't pay for it. The insurance covers it all, and any COVID test that you have to have done. So if you're mandated by the state, you're mandated by the school, you're mandated by whatever, they will cover that test. If you just go in and say, I want a COVID test to make sure you have COVID, then they're gonna charge you for it. But if I send my daughter to school and she has the sniffles and she can't go back to school without a COVID test 6 weeks in a row, they're gonna cover all 6 of those tests.
But at this point, they don't charge anyhow for COVID tests.
No.
So, and I guess there's still confusion as far as teachers are concerned. If you have to quarantine, we use our own sick days, but if it's positive, the federal government is going to cover sick days. Is that the same for the municipality or the village? So if you test positive and you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, they don't burn their own sick days.
Correct. I still haven't seen the reimbursement plan and how that works with the government. They haven't sent that out yet.
Okay.
But yes, that is essentially the case. If you contract it and you have to quarantine at home, then you do not have to utilize your sick time for it. We just have to keep track and then we will submit to the government for reimbursement.
We haven't had anybody yet.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
We've had a couple people have to stay at home because their kids got sent home from school. And that's just what we've put in to perspective until the kid comes back clean, which is generally 3 days. We have the parents stay home and quarantine as well. But that's a village, that's what we had decided internally. We've had that happen twice now.
And a student, I've had it with our employees, a student just says, I have a headache, or yanked right out.
Oh, yeah.
They have a test and, yeah.
Sniffles, headache.
I think, well, I think it's more like temperature in general, at least I know in the elementary school, it's more about,
Yeah, no, it's just
Anything.
anything.
No, stomach ache.
it's because predominantly it shows off the symptoms like digestive issues. So a stomach ache is one, like a headache, just because it's not normally a temperature, younger students.
No, Sydney had a stomach ache and they sent her home. Well, they sent her to the nurse's office, but she had a pre-existing issue we were working out. So they let her go back to class.
Because generally we go down to the isolation room.
Oh, I got a call from the isolation room from the nurse saying, we hear that there's an ongoing issue. So you send her back to class. She's fine.
She's a fighter.
I'm sure all that'll change over the next month or so. Everyone will get used to what's going on.
Well, I guess I saw the rules Michelle Klein put out for the school as to what they are mandated to do and what causes those things. So unless the state changes the mandate, they have to follow it, even if they know the kids get allergies and, you know.
But I mean, even that's going to change. Look how fast things changed in March when we started COVID. I think they'll adapt quickly.
Hopefully, because once flu season hits, man.
I'm going to say, I have a feeling that it's going to remain as strict as it is in order, if you want your schools to be open.
I think so too.
That's
I think
exactly
they
what
need
you
to.
need to have. Otherwise, the minute you loosen it up,
Mhm.
schools are going to be shut down.
Right, right.
Okay. items, any new business that we haven't touched on? In that case, then under old business, not a lot there right at the moment, but Main Street construction project,
Wednesday.
bid openings, it's Wednesday, October 7th at 11 o'clock. And once we have that, we'll
We're
have,
gonna do that here.
Right there, yes.
it's gonna be done right in this room. That'll give us some direction as to how we're going to go forward with that project. I think we just have the best update we can possibly get. And Art, thank you for that. Short-term rental, that's kind of embedded at this point in the land use code update, I think. Government communication plan,
The only thing happening there is just continued work on the village website. Nothing yet to bring into it. It's just ongoing work.
right.
The local government communication plan.
Yes.
Are we gonna get an update on the litigation regarding the short-term rental issue?
Janet?
That would
Well,
be-
I think that's be an executive session.
Yeah.
I will call council and ask.
Okay, thank
You
you.
haven't heard anything?
I have not.
Um,
I'll email her in fact tonight.
Okay. The other item under old business that I just penciled in, at the last meeting, I asked our commissioners and police department to begin looking into our vehicle and traffic and parking requirements. I have done some research on the history of our vehicle and traffic law, which is quite extensive. I discovered it dates back into the 40s, but it's interesting to follow the history in the chain of amendments, which happen frequently through the years, as Anita and I have discovered. I'd be surprised how many files we had to pull out,
I'm sure they're
but I will
random and
provide,
hoc. and-
I will provide you with the 1998 version of the vehicle and traffic law, which has a very comprehensive detailed listing of our streets, along with a historic history of the amendments that modified even that document. So you can imagine in 22 years that there's been a fairly significant number of amendments that you really have to look at to understand where we are. Some of the street names are still pre-9/11, so there's a real need to look at that. Also, I think maybe we can provide some clarity on speed limits, which is why this is becoming so interesting. And the parking meter rates and hours is something that I think we're obviously looking at and considering. I think at this point, this is a project that's probably going to take 2 or 3 months to work through and maybe some other conversations.
So is this Sally and Scott?
Scott and Art and our PD office.
Just on the whole parking enforcement situation, Peter and I spoke with ATI last week. They are redesigning that quote because the original conversation that was had with Brad and Ivan at the parking lot was not necessarily what was presented to us from the other company, which doesn't exist anymore, we found out. So Peter gave out some very good questions that I never would have known to ask. So they're gonna rework that quote and rework some other things to see what they can come up with as far as the gate system for the main parking lot.
What I'm hoping can happen here is that all of these conversations can be dealt with, and we will be looking down the road with an eye toward next spring and the conditions that we're going to have to deal with at that time. So there is kind of an overview that's developing. Yes, parking meter rates are a consideration. Hours are a consideration. But I think we have a bigger job to do as a board to align all of this stuff so that it makes sense for our community.
So Mayor, the one thing I feel, and I could be wrong, that we are all in agreement is some sort of overnight parking charge for the municipal lot. Is that something that we could move forward with as a way to get people comfortable? It's not as intrusive or It doesn't drum up as many questions or concerns as the parking in other areas, but it does address maybe its utilization by either businesses, whether short-term rentals or others that are, more of an overnight situation.
I think it's fair to say at this point, my office has received one cautionary note from one of our Main Street
I'd rather
people.
today.
And
Well worded.
we'll certainly, and that is driving a little bit of my thinking here, that we want to be, we want to be sure that what we're doing is in fact being done for the right reasons, and that it doesn't make life more difficult for some people.
The one thing that I would feel, at least with this particular issue, is that I think it's going to be, we might have a bigger mess as maybe short-term rentals start to become more prevalent in the business district, and the utilization of that space will go.
We did anticipate that when the short-term rental legislation was put in place, and we did embed parking regulations in there for properties on Main Street. Although they're zero setback properties with no on-site parking, they still have to provide a parking plan to the code officer. I will say that and I haven't confirmed it myself, but I will, that perhaps some people are just looking to ignore that. I don't know how you can ignore it and get a permit, though. It's in the legislation. It's enforceable.
Well, we've had people ignore the permit process altogether, so that's not surprising.
We're getting close.
Yeah.
But, and again, I think the important thing here is that we're going to look at this as a project that needs to be looked at in its entirety.
Makes sense.
And hopefully have it done before we open the ground up next spring, if we get to open the ground up. Anything else under old business? We'll keep that item on there as an ongoing project, so we don't lose sight of it. And actually, Anita, we have a couple of additional requests. We have to create a pandemic plan, which I know you've begun work on, at least the research end of it. And also, of course, we have the governor's order for the police department. I did, talking with Bill some, we've reached out to an outside consultant who, as of this morning, I've not heard back from, but just wanted to invite her to educate us as to what she might be able to bring to that project that might be beneficial, if at all. So I'll be talking to you about that when we get a response. If we don't, we're kind of winging it. Actually, I will say I'm a little jealous. The Nikon is providing some guidance on the
So, yeah.
on the pandemic side.
But we'll see, because it's not a one size fits all thing, so
That's
we'll
right.
see what they provide us with.
For sure. Well, neither one of these projects is,
Exactly.
unfortunately.
Exactly.
The booklet that I received would have worked fine for the city of, say, Rochester
Right.
or New York City. It's a little overkill for
Mhm.
2,500 residents in Lake Placid. Commissioner reports?
The thing I have is on the sidewalk project. If you've noticed, they put the granite in the village portion.
I think they're getting ready to pour the concrete out
They're
there.
coming on Wednesday if the weather works out, and they're just going to stay here until it's done. And that will include the cap on the wall and the railing. And I did check with Brad, and it is just the top. The wall itself doesn't need repair, just the cap. And they have also the spots where people didn't want their driveways interrupted. And they have chewed up the blacktop in the town portion and put a base coat down, but there is still a final coat to go. And if you remember, we put the temporary skim coat on our end. So that'll be that for the winter.
So it looks like that project will wrap up hopefully just in time for snowfly.
And I've heard no complaints, nothing but compliments on how nice the sidewalk is to walk on.
Because it's even,
And you
there isn't coal patch,
There's no
like
holes.
intermingled
And it also
with
doesn't
smooth
go up and
stones.
down, now the cars coming and going have to do that.
Mhm.
Nice improvement.
Yeah, but even the elevation change for an automobile is not bad. I think the design on those curves was.
Especially once the blacktop comes.
Yeah,
in.
brings up a little.
So it turned out well. Other than that, the electric department, probably the one major thing they're, aside from the many projects that they've accomplished, is that we're still working on the cabling on the lake. Hopefully they'll get that done before the water gets cold.
Standpoint.
Sandpoint, and there's still cable to pull out there. So they got work going forward.
Yeah, and they've been working on the EV charger.
Yes,
Mhm.
in the parking lot. So
Clean that
that'll
up.
clean up that little area where the fountain is, so we won't have that mess of electric pieces, equipment that's clustered around it.
Are we looking to enclose, maybe we brought this up, the fountain, we have that really nice stone sort of sitting area, and then the other side is garden. Are we looking to enclose the whole thing? Or,
Maybe with a stone wall.
yeah,
There's that I heard.
it'd be nice. Just throwing it out there.
Save something for the future.
Yeah.
It's expensive. That's fine. It's expensive. Oh my goodness.
I can give you an update on that litigation.
Okay.
The motion to dismiss is fully submitted, so we're just waiting for a decision, hopefully within a month.
And when was that filed, the motion to dismiss?
I don't know the date. I just emailed April while we were at the meeting and asked her the status, and she said it's fully submitted, just waiting for a decision, hopefully within the month. You can't make a judge move quicker, and it's federal court, so I don't know even if they've been in court or everything's COVID and they're working from home, but everything's submitted. We, of course, submitted our motion, our memorandum of law, and the opposing side submitted their paperwork too. So that's where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Is there anything else to come before the board? If not, I'll invite our audience to make any comments or questions they would propose. We'll have to unmute everybody, I guess.
I think they need to unmute themselves. Yes, if anyone wants to talk, please unmute yourself. Liz?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Liz.
So you mentioned a meeting on the Main Street project Wednesday at 11. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Bid opening.
That is to receive the contractor's bids, Liz, at which time they'll be
Okay.
opened. I doubt seriously that we'll do any more than open and record them. I believe that the next step then will be to move them to our engineer for review and recommendation.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that that's the, contractor's bid and not like a public session or anything.
No.
No.
It won't be any award, that's for sure.
Any
Thanks so
other
much.
questions?
None from me. Thanks.
I think the bid opening is an important step, but it's just a step.
It's just a step, that's right. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Scott
Second.
and Jason,
I